I do have a little bit of a bio intro to introduce
Oh, yeah.
you. So I was just trying to make sure I could get your. So Libby Hastings is the Communication and Public Relations Coordinator for Kansas Advocates for Better Care. She's from El Dorado, Kansas, has a BA in biology from Knox College, lived in Denver for a couple of years, and has a passion for nonprofit and advocacy work, and served as nursing home transitions coordinator and targeted case manager for a Center for Independent Living in Boulder, Colorado. And Barb Conant is a contract lobbyist with a focus on healthcare, KanCare, and civil justice issues. Her professional experience includes work with Kansas state government and nonprofit associations, and has experience building broad-based partnerships among varied and diverse groups, including state government entities, advocacy and consumer groups, nonprofit organizations, and consumers. And she's built broad-based partnerships. I've included that. She's represented Kansas Advocates for Better Care since 2011. And these ladies are going to tell us about Kansas Advocates for Better Care, and we can discuss those issues.
Yeah.
All right, welcome.
I'm gonna start us out. Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming and listening to our presentation. We really appreciate it. As Kelly mentioned, my name is Libby. I'm the Communication and Public Relations Coordinator for Kansas Advocates for Better Care. And before we get to talking about current state of long-term care in Kansas and the ways we believe that we can improve it, I want to touch a little bit about our organization itself. So, can you go to the next slide? Yes.
Here we go.
Wonderful. So I want to talk about our founding real quick because I think it's very important to highlight the work that we do. So KABC starts with Petey Cerf. Petey Cerf was a regular volunteer in a nursing facility where she would read to nursing home residents. There was one particular day where she was reading to a particular resident who was blind and had both feet amputated. One day, while Petey was reading to this resident, the resident called out, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." A nurse walked by to her room, looked in the room, and said, "Shut up, you're always yelling." In a couple of days, Petey Cerf read that resident's name in the obituaries. Now, Petey Cerf, along with a band of 6 other women from the Lawrence and Topeka communities, and I like to highlight, especially for a Women for Kansas meeting, that these were all women who initiated the charge for long-term care reform. These women came together to host community dialogues, to phone and meet with concerned citizens about the quality of care in nursing facilities. Now, they were originally met with hostilities from local and state officials who had previously received all of their information about long-term care from the industry itself. They eventually piqued the interest of Governor Bennett, who began a series of surprise nursing home visits, where he found quality care in a few and some serious problems in others. This band of 6 women, along with Governor Bennett, helped create a couple of significant pieces of nursing home legislation, one of them being the introduction of civil penalties for uncorrected violations against the safety, sanitation, and nutrition of residents. And now, while our organization has changed over the years, so we originally Kansans for Improvement of Nursing Homes, but in 1996, our name changed to Kansas Advocates for Better Care, or KABC. But our mission has really remained the same, and that is to advocate for the fundamental right to be treated with dignity, respect, and receive quality long-term care. Slide. So at KABC, we're dedicated to improving the quality of long-term care at home and in residential care settings. And we envision a Kansas where all older adults enjoy excellent quality of life, no matter where they choose to live. So what exactly do we do at KABC? I like to divide what we do into 3 different categories: advocacy, empowerment, and resources. So we empower older adults and their families to make decisions about long-term care. We help families and individuals, and we connect them to resources to help navigate the ever-changing landscape of long-term care. One specific way we do this is through our consumer information reports, which I'll show an example of in a couple slides. These consumer information reports contain the inspection data of those Kansas licensed adult care facilities, including our Kansas nursing homes and assisted living facilities. So for families and folks that are ready to make that next step towards institutional level care, we have the data and the inspection data about these facilities to help families and individuals make an informed decision. We also keep the public up to date on long-term care trends, both locally and nationally. We do this through a couple ways. One of them is we have a monthly e-newsletter, and then we recently restarted our paper newsletter. We print these quarterly, and we've got a couple available for you to take home if you want. But these newsletters contain the facilities in Kansas that have the most fines, so that have the most deficiencies cited. And so we have the amount of fines that they've received, and we update this quarterly too. We send this out both in print, and we have an online version too. So along with this, we also have a wide variety of resources, both online and print. I included a bunch on the table too, but I wanted, I've got a couple here, which I'll talk about a little later on. So along with our resources, we also host a series of trainings. We recently had a training in, it was last Thursday actually. It's called our annual caregiver training. We had two presenters, one discussing person-centered approaches to dementia care, and another presenter on navigating Medicare and Medicaid to pay for long-term care costs. I also brought with me a screen sheet. So our presenter, her name is Karen Weber, and she's an elder law attorney, and she's also on our board. And so this is a cheat sheet about navigating Medicaid and Medicare for long-term care costs, because you'd be surprised what it doesn't cover. So that's also available for you. And so the last part, and one of the most important parts about what we do, is we're big public policy advocates. So in and out of session, we are in Topeka meeting with our legislators and having discussions about long-term care. We most recently provided testimony for a nursing home reimbursement rate special committee that was on Thursday and Friday, and it went okay. So both in and out of session, we're in Topeka advocating for that fundamental right to be treated with dignity and respect. Wonderful. And so I wanted to provide a couple examples of some of the callers that we've had and some of the people that have asked for help from us. That first one, we do get a lot of callers asking about the inspection data for Kansas licensed adult care facilities. We have also heard a number of calls about the use and abuse of antipsychotic medication, especially as a chemical restraint for folks with Alzheimer's and other dementia-related diagnoses. Okay, so these are an example of our consumer information reports that are available for free for anyone that wants them. We can mail them out, we can email them out, we can walk you through what these mean. So on the far side, we have the past 3 years of inspection data for these facilities, and we can walk you through what those mean, because sometimes they're a little confusing. It also provides the number of beds that they have in total, who the current and prior administrators are, who the management firm is, if they have one, if they are a nursing facility, an assisted living facility, if they have both, what all that means. So this is just an example of one of the resources that we offer to help folks make an informed decision if they're ready to make that kind of decision. And then quickly, I want to talk about 2 of our most popular resources that we offer. So I brought a bunch of these with me, so feel free to take some with you. But this is our Declaration of My Care Choices form. So this is a 4-page document that lets you write down what you want your long-term care to look like. So this is not meant to replace an advance directive or a living will, but this is meant to enhance it. And it also has some great questions for you to ask yourself and maybe your loved ones if you want to start a dialogue about long-term care. Also reminds you of your rights as a long-term care consumer. The next one I want to offer is this really nicely printed booklet that talks about the care if you want to receive care at home. It asks a lot of questions for you to consider when choosing care at home. So this is really another great booklet just to have on hand. And before we get Barb up here and talk about the current state of long-term care in Kansas, I wanted to highlight that our organization is a nonprofit. We do not receive any state or federal funding, and we certainly don't receive money from the long-term care industry. We are funded solely by private donations. But I wanted to highlight our 17th annual fundraising event, Stand By Me, The Next Generation, on October 14th in Lawrence here at Maselli's. It'll be a really fun evening of food, drink, you can win raffle prizes or auction prizes, and I believe Mandolin Dave is playing, I think that's his name. But it'll be a really great evening, and who knows, maybe even Spock will make an appearance. So then I'm gonna let Barb come up here and talk about the current state of long-term care in Kansas.
Thanks, Libby. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. Libby gave you a real good overview of long-term care in Kansas. And there's a lot of, and you can see that, you know, there's gonna be a lot of us by 2030, 20% of the state will be over the age of 65. There's a lot of us boomers out there. We're all there, right? So you hear a lot of terms: assisted living, nursing homes, home plus, board and care homes, that kind of thing. There's a distinct difference between all of those. The terms are used interchangeable a lot, and I think we tend to think of them as kind of one big group. But starting at the bottom is nursing facilities, and those are the ones where you think of going, you have to go to a nursing home because you need 24-hour care. That doesn't necessarily mean there's gonna be a nurse there 24 hours. There's staff there to take care of you. But contrary to popular belief, there's not necessarily a nurse in the building. There are efforts underway at the federal level to require that. And not surprisingly, the industry is kind of having a fit about that because there is a severe staffing shortage in nursing homes. But at the same time, I think it's a multifaceted problem that we have to attack from all sides. So you have 24-hour care. People are generally there. Those are the folks, you know, you visit when you go to a traditional nursing home. And those are facilities who generally accept Medicare and Medicaid funding, and they have to comply with state and federal laws. The next, you kind of think of it, it's become a real, you know, that's kind of a catch-all term, is assisted livings. And those are less, there's more independence for the residents there. It's like I said, a residential setting. Those are for folks who have lower care needs, and they don't require like 24-hour kind of supervision. And then there are home plus facilities, and those are smaller, started out as folks who had room in their house, and they would take or they would take older adults. Can't have more than 12 individuals. When home pluses first became a thing and the first statutes were passed, I think they could accept 8, and then it went up to 10, and it's been 12 for the last, probably 12 to 15 years. And again, those were generally people who would open their homes and take in residents. Now we see some of the bigger corporations in the nursing home business now incorporating home pluses into their continuum of care. While there's distinctions, there's also different rules and regulations. Nursing facilities, like I said, are licensed by the state and federal government. Home plus and assisted living, those are generally state licensed only. So they don't have to comply with those federal guidelines and federal rules and statutes. So that's the difference, and it's I think difficult to keep all of those separated, and because we do kind of tend to mush them up, you tend to think that those same safeguards and patient protections and consumer resident protections, are the same through all of the different facilities, and they're not. A quick example of that is a piece of legislation that KABC has been working on for about 4 years, and that would be to give residents of assisted living facilities the right to appeal involuntary discharge. That right is covered for nursing home residents. If you get the boot and you don't believe you should, or you wanna contest that, there's a way to appeal that. If you live in the community, and you're covered by the Landlord-Tenant Act. For people who are in assisted livings, because that's state license only, that right to appeal a discharge didn't get carried over when they made those regulations back in the day, those assisted living regulations. So, it's a problem, and it's one that we hear about, on a pretty regular basis. A woman from Maple Hill, Kansas came to KABC 4 or 5 years ago. Her husband passed it's been 12 years ago, I believe now. He was in a facility, he had dementia, he was in a memory care unit in Maple Hill. She cared for him at home as long as she could. And then found a place for him. Eventually, they couldn't take care of his needs. She found a facility closer to home. It was a memory care facility. Everything was fine. He was there a year plus. She renegotiated his contract. 2 weeks later, they said, oh, by the way, we've got a change in the business model. You and 5 other residents are out. And she's in, under a nursing home facility, you would have 30 days to appeal that. And she said, how long do I have? And they said, clock's ticking, you need to move. So she scurried around, found him a place. It was difficult for her, it was very difficult for him. She moved him to another facility. He died 9 days later from transfer trauma, which is a very, very real thing. And she has made it her life's mission, I think, at this point, to be able to provide for families to have a way to appeal that involuntary discharge. She turned over every rock she could. She talked to attorneys. She went to the Attorney General's office, and the Assistant Attorney General she talked to said, there's no law on the books that's been broken because those residents don't have the right to appeal. There's nothing we can sue against. There's no law that's been broken. We need better laws. So Mrs. Imthern eventually connected with KBC, and we've been working with her, she's probably the most tenacious advocate I've ever met. She says she still wakes up in the middle of the night wondering what she could have done. I know, to make Charlie's life easier and to maybe have prevented his death. And that kind of breaks my heart every time I think about it. And for Mrs. Imthern, this is why we do what we do. But it's as you probably all know, legislation it's kind of like a game of chutes and ladders. You make it up to the top and then you hit one of the bad spots and down you go again. And we've got legislation on the books, and we're working with Mrs. Imthern's House member, Representative Titus from Manhattan. And so while we get thwarted, we regroup and we're trying again. So we call that bill Charlie's bill for Mrs. Imthern's husband. So that's kind of the difference that shows the real difference in rules, regulations, laws, statutes that may cover one that doesn't cover another. Next one. And if anybody has any questions during any of this, please feel free to ask. By many metrics, Kansas is not doing a swell job in terms of long-term care. We rank 47th in the nation for low care residents, and that's kind of a backwards way of saying there's too many people in our nursing homes that could be served, that have low care needs, that could be served in the community if there were the services there to do that. So we're, the goal would be to keep people at home, and that's where they want to stay. That's, everybody jokes about, nobody wakes up and says, boy, what I'd like to do is move to a nursing home, or that's on nobody's bucket list. Even the nursing home folks say that. But because we funded institutional care at a higher rate than we have home and community-based services. Those services often aren't there, when the people need them. We also have a severe nursing home or nursing, staff shortage. That 36 of our adult care facilities, report staff shortages, and, that's a 17% increase from 2020. And, back one more. Sorry, that's fine. And another issue that we have worked hard on.
Sorry.
That's fine. Is the overuse, and inappropriate use of antipsychotic medications especially for people with cognitive and, issues and dementia. We have hovered near the bottom in the last 10 or 12 years. For all the time I've been working at KABC, this has been an issue. Nursing homes aren't allowed to physically restrain residents. That's a deficiency. If they found that they've done that, lap boards, wrists, tying people to beds, that kind of thing, that's not allowed. But they are able to chemically restrain them through the use of antipsychotics. Not surprisingly, people with dementia have behaviors, that's communication issues, they're frustrated, they can't. Do you have water? I have some in the car, but I didn't bring any, sorry. That's fine, that's all right. I should have thought to bring mine in. But Kansas has really overused, and we're allowed to do that. And it's kind of approved. The medical directors, we've had lots of hearings on this, and the nursing home folks talk about it, but they go, well, what else are we gonna do? We don't have the staff, and, what else are we gonna do with somebody who's acting out? And families are frustrated, and they don't like getting those calls from the nursing home that says your loved one has had a spell or has acted out or whatever. So we've worked hard, introduced some legislation over a couple of years to try and reduce the use of the overuse and the inappropriate use of antipsychotics. But the nursing home industry will counter that, and medical directors will come in and say, well, you have to do it. That continues to be one of our talking points, and it goes back to the staffing shortage, because if you don't have the staff to take care of people, your next best option is to chemically restrain them. So it's not a good option, and it's one that we continue to fight about. And it is a huge quality indicator, and it's connected directly to staffing. Now you can go. Long-term care isn't inexpensive. We hear all the time of families who say they're paying $10,000 a month to keep their loved one, their family member in a facility. Nursing homes, of course, nursing facilities are gonna be more expensive. A semi-private room and these are averages, so it could be a little less, it could be a lot more. Private rooms are more than that. Assisted living's almost $5,000 a month, and home health is almost $5,000 a month. If you're Medicaid eligible, then you can be covered by KanCare under the frail elderly waiver, and that will help with those costs. But again, there's staffing shortages there too, and it's hard for people to find direct care to come into their home. I'm also part of a large coalition called KanCare Advocates Network, and our coalition partners are providers and advocates for people on all of the served by KanCare, and a lot of them served by the 7 HCBS waivers, and all of them, and some of them need direct care themselves, and they all have trouble finding help. So it's a problem, but I think that It just means that this is an opportunity for us to kind of relook at how we provide long-term care, the needs that are out there, and how do we address that, and how do we attract people to this kind of work. It is kind of loud.
Books.
Technology's a blessing and a curse. So how do you pay for long-term care, particularly in the community? How does that work? Kansas has what we call the Senior Care Act, and that is state funded only. That's only state general funds from Kansas, no federal monies. It's our own program. And it's been around since the 80s, I believe. And Senior Care Act those services are provided for those people who aren't quite Medicaid eligible yet, but they still need help with mowing their yard or laying out their meds or some stuff around the house. It's minimal amount of help, and I think the average person under the Senior Care Act, it's probably costs the state less than $2,000 a month, but it's money well spent because that keeps those people in their homes, and allows them to delay or maybe avoid altogether institutional care. And they do contribute some. There's a sliding scale for that. The Older Americans Act, that is federally funded, and like it says, one of the things that it pays for the most, one of the things that you would all recognize would be Meals on Wheels or congregate meals at a senior program, or any kind of home delivered meals. Legal assistance, caregiver support, and transportation, and those Older Americans Act dollars go through KDADS, and then they go to the area agencies on aging. So they're the boots on the ground that help with these kinds of services. And then like I mentioned, was the Home and Community-Based Services Frail Elderly Waiver. Kansas has 7 of those waivers, and what that means is long-term care in a facility is an entitlement. You've worked all your life, you're entitled to those services. And if you reach a certain threshold when you're assessed, and it is fairly low, you can be admitted to a nursing home. But these waivers allow the state to say, if you don't want to do that, we can care for you at home, and then they can pay for that. Frail elderly, people who are brain injured, physically disabled, those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism, and those who need technical assistance. And there's one more, who am I forgetting? They all are covered under these HCBS waivers. HCBS is covered by KanCare. Medicaid is what Medicaid in Kansas is called KanCare. And so again, those are more services if you need them for activities of daily living. And like the slide said, you have to meet both functional and financial eligibility requirements to be served under the waiver.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
That waiver, it's pretty darn low. You have to be pretty poor in order to get any of these services, is that correct?
That is true. There is a functional assessment to that though, so that helps, but yes, it does. One of the things we worked on several years ago was if you were covered by one of those waivers, everything you got, retirement, Social Security, any kind of income that you had, went to the waiver, went to the state, now the managed care organization, and you were allowed to keep $747. And that number hadn't been increased since forever. And nobody could look on that. And you have people of all ages on all of those waivers, and it was just really low. The federal government has a limit of what states can allow people to keep under that personal income limit. And so we worked really hard and it took over the course of about 3 years to raise it to the federal standard. It's now you can keep more than $2,000 and it's indexed. So along with the social SSI, supplemental income. Yeah, thank you. So when that goes up, so does Kansas's personal allowance. Before they would, a person would get an increase in SSI, and you never see it because it all went to the MCO. So we were really, really pleased to be able to work with the legislature and increase that. And you do have rights and protections as a nursing home resident, and those are your rights. Don't let folks tell you otherwise. Most of those came as a result of the Nursing Home Reform Act of 1987, and that was about the time Petey Cerf was working here and bending Governor Bennett's ear. I never knew Petey, but I worked at what was then SRS, Social and Rehabilitative Services, for the state at the time. And I do know that when somebody had a meeting with Petey, that everybody was on their best behavior. And even Dr. Harder, some of you might remember Dr. Robert Harder, who ran SRS, even he was in awe of Petey. She was a force to be reckoned with. And so a lot of these came as a result, and she was very, very active at the national level, which what was called NICNR at the time. I don't know what all these acronyms. National Council for Nursing Home Reform. So that all happened then, and those rights came about as a result of Petey and a lot of women here in Topeka several of them were legislators, and they were as tenacious as they could be and just wouldn't take no for an answer. So we stand on their shoulders today. And your family members also have rights, and those are statutory rights. And again, these are for nursing home residents and may not necessarily transfer over to assisted livings. And it's good to know that. I know nobody wants to sit around on a Saturday night and read Kansas statutes, but we do hear on a pretty regular basis that family members are told when they tell a family, well, we have to do this with your mother, we have to do that with your father. Well, it's a state regulation, or the federal government makes us do that. And that's not always the case, but nobody's gonna question that. So you should question it and look to KBC or an elder rights attorney if you're told that and you think it sounds a little questionable. One of the most, before we do that, I just want to, the second bullet up there, I want to point that out. Again, that's one of those things that they will try and tell you you're responsible for your loved ones.
What kind of electronic monitoring do people do?
It is allowed. It is. It's a video camera in the room.
Oh, putting up video.
The nursing home folks didn't like that much.
No, I don't.
And we're supposed to be rules and regulations written and promulgated by the State Department, KDADS. The law's been in effect 5 years plus, and we still don't have rules and regs. The nursing homes will tell you that they can't do it, they don't have the broadband, you're not allowed to do it, the roommate doesn't want it. They'll come up with some reasons not to. But that was another KBC piece of legislation that we worked really hard on. At the last minute, as they were working the bill, there was an amendment made that was a surprise amendment to us that said that if you do have that footage, it has to be time and date stamped. And if you use it, you have to use all of it. You can't just pull out a piece of it to show in court, which is unlike any other rule of evidence that's used for other cases. That's still on the books. We tried for a couple of years to get that eliminated, but it's still on the books. But the family does have the right to monitor, to put up the video, and it's been used to catch some bad behaviors. And it came about from a woman in Wichita whose mother, I believe it was abused, and it was before the law was passed, and she just went ahead and put a camera up, and then had the proof that her mom had been abused. So yes, you do have, and that's the Kansas statute 39981 that allows you to do that. If you have a roommate, you have to have their permission to do that, of the family members. And there are safeguards in the law to make sure that people's dignity and respect, is protected, and they're not, made vulnerable.
I'm just curious about that unpaid, not versus liable for unpaid long-term care. Is family defined as anything besides the spouse of the person who's in care?
Children, I think.
Yeah, because I would imagine if I put him in the nursing home and then just stop paying for him, I would still be liable, but my kids would not be liable. Just that.
They'll go after whoever they think they can.
Oh, I know.
They can. And one of our board members has experienced that, and they finally just gave up, and they knew good and well, and her mother had passed, and I think there was still an unpaid bill because she passed early in the month, and they wanted the payment for the rest of the month. I'm not sure exactly what the situation was, and they fought it for about 3 years, and the facility finally wore them down, and they paid it just to be done with it, and they knew that they weren't. But read the fine print in the contract too, just to make sure that they don't try and slide that or some arbitration language in there. To be real nice, take her out to dinner tonight. That's nice. Is that all you need, Libby?
I think they skipped one.
There you go. If you are in a facility, these are really good strategies, and the National Consumer Voice, which was NICNR before it became the National Consumer Voice, there's a wealth of information there, and they are super good advocates, and they work with state folks like us in drafting comments for the federal government when there's public comment periods open, that kind of thing. But those are good family advocacy strategies. I'd also mention that most facilities have family councils or resident councils, and so get involved with those, talk to other family members. If you're looking for a place and you're comparing facility A versus B, talk to the family members there. Most of them will be happy to talk to you. The previous executive director and I met with a group of 5 or 6 women whose husbands were in a facilities in Kansas City a number of years ago. And, they were very blunt and very forthright with us. And, they were doing everything from taking their husband's shoes home with them at night so that they didn't get stolen. They were doing all their laundry because if it went in the main laundry, they didn't get the right clothes back to the right people. I mean, they were paying a lot of money and still doing all the work, and most of them stayed there most of the day, helping with feeding, that kind of thing. So, you're paying a lot of money, but there's still a lot of one-on-one, I think, with the residents who have family, who can come and help.
Yeah, my turn. You. Okay, kind of quickly, but I'm gonna talk about KABC specific, what we envision to improve long-term care in Kansas. I'm gonna talk about 4 specific points that we have. And there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to long-term care, both nationally and specifically in Kansas too. But I wanna talk about 4 specific ones real quick. So, this first one here, I'm gonna ask you all, how many of you got to decide what you wanted for breakfast today? How many of you got to decide when you wanted to eat it? Where you wanted to eat it? When you went to bed last night? When you woke up today? This is what we mean by person-centered care. Person-centered care focuses on the older adult's needs and care preferences consistent with their lifestyle. There are some facilities that do person-centered care really well, and they even get an additional incentive and add-on so they get more money for doing this, but it's not consistent throughout all facilities. And that is what we would like to see, because this is how you care for an individual, is you respect and you value them, which seems pretty simple, right? Considering how much you're paying for it. But this is a big one that we would like to see. I forgot to mention this incentive program for this person-centered care is called the PEAK 2.0 program. And it's a partnership between the state and K-State. PEAK 2.0. PEAK is an acronym for.
It used to have a name and nobody could
No,
remember.
an acronym for it. But that's that incentive program that facilities get for demonstrating. I mean, there's a big chart of demonstrations that you have to receive an incentive, so more money for doing your job. But here we are. And so we talked about the HCBS, that home and community-based services. I want to point out a stat that we use all the time. That's okay. Sorry. Awesome. A stat we use all the time. 80% of folks want to age in place, want to age at home. Now, I've only been doing this job for about almost 2 years. Barb's been doing it for a lot longer. A lot of our coworkers have been in the long-term care field for a long time. We have yet to meet that 20% that don't want to age in place. The Kansas legislature has been very generous to the nursing home industry when it comes to funding, especially during COVID too. And so what we're asking for is, what if the home and community-based services got as much money? What if? And we know there's a lot of pillars that have to happen for home and community-based services to really be successful. I mean, we're talking housing, transportation, food, mental health services. But what if all of those got as much money as the facilities do? Could we make that 80% really a reality? Where 80% of folks really got to age in place? Because that's what they want. Why are we not diversifying our taxpayer dollars? And if we're diversifying and putting more money into home and community-based services, wouldn't that create a little competition for the nursing home industry? Think maybe they might improve their care a little bit? Who knows? So this is just a reality we'd like to see happen. And we're working towards making it happen. This third one, I get in a little bit in the weeds of this one a little bit, so bear with me, and if you have any questions, ask Barb. So the restoration of independent case management services for the frail, elderly, and also the brain injured and physically disabled waivers. So in 2013, with lovely Brownback, we got managed care organizations. So we turned to a managed care model for folks on Medicaid. Previously, before the managed care model, folks had independent case management services. With the managed care organizations, that all went away and turned into something called care coordination. So care coordinators work for the managed care organizations. And care coordinators are an 800 number. They want to do what's easiest for the managed care organization. It's rumored that a care coordinator has about a caseload of 200, and they're geographically dispersed. So they may not be based in your community. We don't think care coordination is really successful because, as Barb mentioned, we are ranked 47th in the nation for residents that don't need to be in facilities or in facilities. And so what we want to see with independent case management is, so management, we have a plan already in place, because it was successful before Brownback brought in managed care organizations. We have a network of community partners based in counties. So we have area agencies on aging, centers for independent living, and then Minds Matter for brain injury waivers. They would help run the independent case management services. And the independent case managers would work for the individual, not for the managed care organizations. We have seen that it can be really difficult to manage your care needs at home. So say if your CNA doesn't show up, what do? Say you need more care. Say you need less care. It can be really challenging to navigate. And so having an independent case manager is another person on your team to help you, to walk you through what you gotta do, to figure out who you need to call. So we've advocated very heavily for this, and we should find out in October 2nd, if this will be a reality or not. There's a couple different ways in which we've brainstormed on how to finance this. And so we will see there's a big RFP drop coming on October 2nd. So we'll find out if this will be a reality or not. But if it's not, we're gonna keep advocating for it, because we think this would really improve those low care folks in facilities that could be living at home. It's just another team, another player on your team. This last one here is kind of broad, but it's really important. Pay your staff well and train your staff. So the average cost of a facility bed, this is nationally, it's $94,000. In Kansas, it's about $87,000, which is a lot of money. The median pay nationally was less than 14% for direct care staff. Direct care staff are responsible for about 80% of the care of a resident in a facility, and they're getting paid less than $14 an hour. 45% of direct care staff are reliant on public assistance. Here in Kansas, last year, there was a bill introduced by the nursing facility industry to lower the training standards, so to lower the number of hours needed to be a CNA. And they thought this was the way to maybe help the staffing shortages. So we have a lovely volunteer, her name's Addison. She's a CNA, and she's also a student at KU, wants to go to medical school, thinks she's gonna be phenomenal. When we brought this forward to her, we said, how do you think this would help if they lowered the number of training hours? She said it would be a Band-Aid on a bullet hole wound. She said, what are they going to cut? We don't get enough training hours as is. She said, I barely got any training on folks with Alzheimer's and dementia. What are they gonna cut? And so, bravely, she testified in front of a committee about this, about her own personal experience as a CNA. And boy, howdy, if that bill didn't die so fast because of that testimony.
It's not dead. It's just,
It's sleeping.
it's sleeping. They never worked the bill. They had a hearing on it, but it never worked, and this is the second year of a biennium. So it could come back at any point, and we're just holding our breath and not saying its name out loud. So
Yes,
it doesn't.
we'll utter the name of the bill or the number of it.
I don't remember what it was.
So, I just wanted to highlight with that story the importance of advocacy and telling your story, and with working with us, and we can help you tell your story to make some positive changes in the legislature. And then we just got one more story with
What
us.
committee do you guys have to testify to usually?
Generally, both of the health committees, the House and Senate health committees,
It's great that they listen to you, because I represent a different organization. They don't listen to us at all.
well, I'm not so sure I'd say they listen to us, but we just keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and they do, but both health committees, the KanCare Oversight Committee, which has a really long name, named after a former representative, Bob Bethel, and for the Social Services Budget Committee, the committees that fund the state agencies that we generally deal with, which is Health and Environment and Department.
Did we get judiciary?
A little bit in judiciary. Charlie's bill was in judiciary in the House. It was
Do you do health and human services? Ever? No.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've had success with them?
Well, you know, the CNA bill that hasn't been worked, that's success. Sometimes it's not the bills you get passed, it's the bills you stop.
Okay.
And we play a lot of defense, a lot of defense. And I'm not being snarky here when I say the nursing home industry has a powerful lobby.
Yes.
They really do.
Yeah.
And they do it well, because all of their nursing homes have the ear of their legislators.
Mhm.
And that's where
That helps.
and that's who they listen to, and, you know, generally it's, you know, they have relationships, work relationships, as well as, you know, my son's grandson's kid plays ball with your, that kind of thing. And they have their ear, and they talk to them a lot and often. It also doesn't hurt that former Governor Mark Parkinson is executive director of the
Well, we
National.
know those nursing homes for years.
Yeah, the for-profit nurse, well, he heads up the for-profit nursing home association, nationally too. And so he also has the ear of legislators. So we're small, you know, we depend on the folks like Addison, who, was an articulate young woman who was the last conferee of the day and pretty much knocked it out of the park.
Nice.
But again, you know, the chair of that committee loved her that bill. And so, you know, we just keep our fingers crossed that it makes it quietly, stays quietly quiet and not worked this year. They've got a lot of other things on their plate, so hopefully it stays that way. But it's like Libby said, it's the stories you guys have that really make a difference, and if they hear from a lot of consumers and consumer families, it makes a difference. The problem is, those are hard stories to tell. They're really hard stories to tell, and after you've lived them, the last thing you wanna do is relive them in public, in front of a podium with people who are kind of, you know, questioning what you're telling them. Or they think it's a one-off kind of, well, it happened to you, but that doesn't happen to everybody. Those are hard stories, and we totally appreciate that. And if your loved one is still in a facility, you don't wanna tell that story because you have fears of retaliation and retribution, and next thing you know, you'll get an involuntary discharge and you can't appeal it. So, you know, it's rough, it's real rough. But we still need those stories because we can take them to the legislature and tell them anonymously. We don't have to, you know, to give names and faces, but we really need those stories to tell, because it really is a David and Goliath kind of setup there. They've got the power, and we've got the stories. But, you know, you just have to keep doing it. After the last couple of days of this reimbursement hearing, 2 days, and it was, you know, it was dry stuff. It's how you calculate nursing home reimbursement rates. And there was a lot of empathy for the facilities, and, oh, you want more money for this? Sure. You know, an extra add-on for that, not a problem. Just as an example, last year's budget, nursing home rates are rebased every 3 years, or they're supposed to be by statute. They take the rolling 3-year average, rework their rates and say, well, this is what we think you're gonna spend next year. So it's kind of a prospective thing. They rebased their rates last year. That resulted in an additional $30 million, give or take 32. Then they got a special Medicaid add-on to kind of help them over the hump. They got a lot of money during COVID for good reason, because that was like ground zero. That extra add-on gave them another $62 million. They got a budget last year of almost $100 million, and when you factor in some of the other side things, they got $96 million, and they're back this year saying, well, nobody closed in the last 6 months, so that add-on worked, we want that again. And, oh yeah, we want rebates, and we wanna do that on an annual basis instead of a rolling 3-year average now. Sure, now they asked for another add-on to care for dementia patient residents. Then there was another add-on that they were talking about. But, you know, it's kind of a nickel and dime thing, except those nickel and dimes have some pretty serious money behind them. And like Libby said, if we were to take a portion of that and redirect it to home and community-based services, think what we could do. And Dan made that point when he testified on Thursday, and one of the legislators said, well, sure, but I think we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot in Kansas because we've built a pretty strong HCBS program, and now we've put these nursing homes at risk financially because people aren't going there. So, and not, you know, not that they shouldn't stay at home, but we've probably done ourselves a disservice because we're not, they have staffing shortages and this, that, and the other. So, I'm not sure we wanna put that money in home-based services because we put this particular industry at financial risk, which I thought was
I mean, are they really at financial risk? It strikes me that this is one of the most profitable things going. I mean, they're making money hand over fist, it seems to me. I mean, they pay their people so little, they charge so much.
right.
Where's that money going?
Yes.
Exactly.
And if by all quality standard, it's not being reinvested in the facilities because we still have problems with antipsychotics, they can't hire people. Now, some can, some don't have problems, but there are facilities who can't. And I tend to think it's a culture thing.
Well, there's new facilities sprouting up all over the place.
Right.
It's gotta be very profitable.
And they talk a lot about the nursing homes that close or haven't closed. They don't talk about the new ones that are being built, like the new geriatric behavioral one in Wichita. A lot of the ones that are closing are being reorganized and may come back as an assisted living because they're not as hardly regulated.
So are there any facilities that are 100% state operated, or is it a hybrid model? You know about the private ones, they're easy enough to find, but the ones that are really operated by the state?
There's only 3, and those are nursing facilities for mental health. And they're for folks with mental illness. There aren't any that are, just kind of like what you would think would be nursing homes that are state regulated. Now, there are some that are connected to their long-term care units of hospitals, or they're run by the county or city. And they get some city funding or county money from them as well. But there aren't any that are total, except for, and this world always has an except for, about 3 years ago, there were a number of facilities that went into receivership. And when that happens, then the state takes them over. And they've managed to sell off all but one of those. I think there was 6 or 7, and and that one's in Topeka, and they haven't been able to find a buyer for that one yet. But they're usually in pretty bad shape when that happens.
So is there a process for looking at that money and disclosure of, the profit margin for the?
Dave Kingsley from here in Lawrence tried to bring that point to the committee on Thursday. He's a former KABC board member, former KU professor, and can crunch a number like nobody's business. And he has kind of made it his passion to do that. And he took that information and it is kind of mind-numbing, and the profit margins and all of that. And a lot of these facilities are being bought up by holding companies, and the buildings are owned by somebody from out of state who really could give a rat's behind what happens in the building. They just wanna see a profit, they wanna see a bottom line. And they'll tell staff, we hear, that, you know, they tell staff, well, don't follow that rule, don't follow that statute. They're hedging their bets. The state's behind in their annual surveys. They've got from 12 to 15 months to get into a facility and do the survey. They have half the number of staff they need. They need, like, I think they could have 64, 67 surveyors, and they've got about 32. So there was a time when facilities were going like 2.5, nearly 3 years between inspection reports or inspections. So, you know, they'll hedge their bets and think, well, you know, I'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission, and, you know, it doesn't happen. So there is a process, and the facilities get the opportunity to appeal a fine. And the fines are only placed on those deficiencies that are the most egregious or the worst. If it's tiered by letters, and so the highest ones are immediate jeopardy of residence, those are IJs, and those are serious business, and they come with a pretty hefty fine. Well, the nursing homes have the ability to appeal those. The assisted living residents don't have the ability to appeal, but they do. They can appeal those fines and often get them reduced or dismissed altogether. There's a process to do that. And those forms that are filled out, that the surveyors do, they're a little difficult to read, but KBC has a staff member who really knows how to do that. And, you know, there's some legislative pushback on that, as legislators were complaining this weekend that they heard that surveyors were kind of mean to the homes, and, you know, Kansas surveyors cited more deficiencies than other states, and how do you train them, and they really quizzed the agency on how that happened. And so that's a theme. I've been around long enough that you guys are mean to us talking point comes around pretty regularly. I had a legislator once tell me that his facility, and he was an administrator, shouldn't have been fined for the mouse that ran across the sandwiches in the kitchen while they were making lunch. I was like, I think that's a deal breaker for me. That's not gonna work. So, you know, there's varying levels of citation, but
We've heard too, it's just tell us how to be better, don't fine us for it. Really, seriously? You want someone to tell you how to do your job?
and the agency is an enforcement agency. It's their job to do that. They're under contract with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, CMS. CMS contracts with the state to do that survey work. So they have to follow the CMS guidelines and the training that comes along with that. So it's a stringent, and it's a hard job. It is. Somebody's in the facility, and those survey, those visits are surprise visits. They don't get any kind of warning, and they're not supposed to. I worked in aging, at the Department on Aging, and was told within the first week that if I ever leaked that information or told somebody if I knew, and I never knew when the surveyors were going out, that was a fireable offense that, that's supposed to be kept really, really secret. So, but like the point, stay connected with KBC, and I want to give a big shout out to the Kansas Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Her name's Camille Russell. She's based in Topeka. She has 7 regions, I believe, and she's got 4 regional directors. She doesn't even have the whole state covered. They do solicit volunteers to go into homes and talk to folks. They are there for the resident, not the family, not the facility. They're there to talk to the resident. And if the resident says, I've got a complaint with this, they won't let me do that. I really want to do something. They are, the long-term care ombudsman is like the epitome of person-centered care. And if you say, do you want me to tell somebody about it? And they say no, then they don't. But if they say yes, Camille and her staff will move heaven and earth to make it happen. And they get a lot of pushback from the federal government, or from the state, from the facilities, but they are, they're created by federal statute. And so they have all of that, and state statutes behind them. And so if you're looking for a volunteer, gig and something to do with your spare time, that would be the place to do it. They do fabulous work, and they know what's going on in the facility, let me just say that. They have some stories to tell. But they're really good people and are always looking for volunteers, so. And they have a website as well. Other questions?
I guess I just wanted to know, and this is a summary of how to support this kind of work and work on the issues of helping keep people in their homes, and things like supporting KABC, and get in touch with.
And again, we could always use your stories, whether you're comfortable coming to Topeka and testifying. You don't even have to now, you can do it via, it's a Zoom-like program. That was one of the best things that happened as a result of COVID, is that now we can have people testify from all over the state or from out of state. We had a person on Thursday testifying from Denver. She's with the National Council on State Legislators. And so it's really broadened the amount of information and the ability for just average citizens to either watch what's going on in Topeka. All the committees are archived, so you can watch them on YouTube, or testify if you're so inclined. I mean, it really has broadened the citizen advocacy at the State House.
I just wanted to mention, most of you probably have heard Justice Matters, one of the organizations here in town. And they have a committee on elder care, because that's one of the things that they've heard at different House meetings. And they are working with a group, and I wanna say they're out of Delaware, I can't really recall their name, but they are trying to improve the number of CNAs that are available to care for the elderly. And not only the training, but the ability to maybe move up in that if they want to become an LPN or RN or whatever. So again, another volunteer organization that's really doing a lot of research to increase that, because although there are certainly problems at the facilities, a lot of facilities and home health agencies who care for people at home have a constant need to try to hire, and they just, a lot of people do not want to work.
Is there a name of a person we can?
We can contact you as well. Brad's on, my husband Brad's on the Elder Care Research Committee.
Yep.
And we're in Justice Matters as well. And it is the Dwyer program that you're mentioning, that they've.
Dwyer Workforce.
Dwyer Workforce.
We're working with Heartland here in town.
Working with Heartland, and Patrick Kelly is the local authority who's helping us with that. Get that model going to try to increase staffing, availability of trained staff, and kind of keep a pathway of increasing their training and getting them into the career.
That's great, because when we were dealing with that CNA bill last year, the voice that wasn't there was the CNAs, until we happened to find Addison. And there were a lot of assumptions being made about what staff wants, needs, and what would draw them in without any input from those folks. So there's not an association or a group of them. I mean, that's what tends to happen at the State House, is an association or a group comes and speaks for their members, and that was the voice that was missing. So that's really, I'm glad to hear that.
I think the other thing you're going to see in healthcare is robotics. You see a lot of that coming down the pike. If anybody, on the web, look at LQ, and it's just an interactive robot sits on your desk to interact to see, have you taken your medicine, have you done this, have you done that? For somebody who's still independent. And then, obviously, we as boomers need to do more planning in long-term care, because we're aging and our children are not ready for that.
That's
I had
true.
a conversation with my kids via text just the other day. One of my daughters sent me a TikTok about long-term care, and my other daughter said, "Oh, she's just, trying to get you to hand over your money." We were all joking back and forth. And I said, "No, my plan is to just spend all my money, and then I'm coming to live with you guys. I'll take turns." They were like, "Oh, solid plan, Mom. That's good."
Yeah, except that doesn't happen.
Right.
So, you need to have another alternative plan in
That's
place.
exactly right.
So,
There is another volunteer organization here in Lawrence, Community Village Lawrence. Do you know about them?
I don't.
So, you pay a very minimal amount. I used to be active with them before I got active with another, group, but, you pay like $25 a month and you get a certain amount of hours, that people will come change the batteries in your fire alarms. They'll help you with small projects in the house. They can help you with cleaning. They'll take you to a doctor's appointment. You sign up, and I would do driving and take people to doctor's appointments. And sometimes they wanted you in there to take notes because they knew. But it's a great organization, and it's kind of going to what you said. Their whole thing is that most people want to age in their homes. And sometimes it's just little things they need. They need someone to mow their yard, or they need someone and they don't have a lot of money to pay someone. And it is a really good organization, I think, if they worked with you all.
Community Village is.
Community Village Lawrence.
I tried to apply to be a volunteer there, but I didn't hear back from them.
You
But
know,
they're a good organization.
They changed over, they had some change, and it might have been at the time.
Yeah.
Because normally they want volunteers.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
No, it does.
Okay, check 1, 2, this is KK,
Is the storm on the way?
COVID really put the kibosh on a lot of volunteer organizations.
That was very problematic.
I know Camille said they lost like 2/3 of their volunteers because, one, they couldn't get into the nursing homes at the time, and then when they could, they were still pretty much infected. There's a lot of COVID in
Yeah,
this.
this is only people in their homes.
Right, but
So,
I
but,
think those volunteer opportunities are starting to come back.
yeah, and a lot of the volunteers are older, so they're nervous about their own health, I'm sure, but, yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I just want to give Representative Haswood an opportunity. If you have any input or comments on, is there anything in this area that you are on any committees or have anything from the state legislature to report?
Yeah, hi, my name's Christina Hassel. I represent House District 10, which is the southeast of Lawrence, Kansas. Kind of like right on the right side of basically 23rd Street south of 19th. And then KINH is my border, and then on the east side, it goes to O'Connell Road. So if you're in that little square, you're in my district. I work a lot with Libby and Barb in the Capitol. I'm on the Health and Human Services on the House side, so I get to hear a lot of this from them. And then it was really great with the testimony too with Abby that came in. It makes a difference if you can get in there in person. And I mean, like Barb said, there's a lot of misinformation that happens, a lot of assumptions, and when someone's not there to counter those assumptions, then sometimes, depending on the chairperson, they can be like, well, we're working this bill and we didn't know. So a lot of the processes can be pushed. And then, like Barb said, that this bill did get a hearing, so it's still pretty much fair game for next session. To be put into anything, to be taken back up into consideration, and it could sneak in through other bills. We have something in the Kansas legislator called gut and go, so if they feel so inclined to, they can pull out these different cards under the table to get this through. So we're really playing defense a lot of times, but I know Barb and Libby are always at the Capitol, which is really good. Just that presence alone, I think people are looking back and seeing if they can get away with anything that day, and sometimes they can't.
Barb sitting back there. No.
Yeah. But I would say if you all are in my district or live in Lawrence, all of the House and Senate reps, most of them, here in the Lawrence area, we all consider everyone our constituents. So if you ever just want to share your story, I'm on the Health and Human Services, and then I don't think Senator Francisco's on public health, or maybe she is. Okay, she's not, but yeah, we can help you with the process as well. And even the process of how to submit testimony is daunting because every committee does it differently. If you ever need to print a physical copy, sometimes committee folks are like, you need 5 copies physically before this time on Monday at this certain time. I'm happy to do it in my office. It takes no time at all.
Good news, it's now like 5, it used to be 100, so.
Okay.
For the Bethel, it used to be like 100 copies or 80 or some ridiculous amount.
I wanted to put in a quick plug for this, as you were mentioning, Christina. We have a quick, just an advocacy 101 handout. It does talk about the political process and about tips for contacting your legislators, and then it gives some shows you how to, if you're just not sure who your legislators are, which you all probably are. It just gives you tips too on how to look up who your legislators are. And would you say most like to be contacted by email?
Yeah, I would say, and we're currently in the off session right now, so we go back January, like the second Monday, I believe. And so you would contact us through our alternative emails. And I would plan on, if there's a bill, to stay in contact with Kansas for Advocate for Better Care and other organizations, because when session starts, things are moving. Things are moving real fast, and usually about the end of February, we're about wrapped up and ready to take some Senate bills and whatnot. So the window is very small. Again, the transparency is really bad in the legislature. There's a new bill, they're probably not gonna notify you until a couple days before, so you guys have an email list? Maybe,
Yes.
or your social media?
Yes, yeah. Yes, so if you, this QR code takes you to sign up for our e-newsletters. And they're also on our website too, which is just kabc.org, to sign up for those. And when session starts, we'll be doing a weekly email update about what happened legislatively for that week. But yeah, that's a good way to, because it does vary, it changes, the time that you need to testify can change, and we're very on top of that during session too, so we can help you navigate that, so you don't have to do that on your own, because it can be very daunting.
And like Representative Haslund said, things move really fast. So using this time now to reach out to your electeds and talk about issues that are important to you, that way when something pops, you already have a relationship built with them, they recognize your name, and you have more of an opportunity to get their ear, because those days go like that. And they're in committees most of the days, so being able to grab them for that 3-minute elevator talk is real important.
If anybody would like to be in contact with Justice Matters, come to a House meeting, be on the research committee, you can contact me with the Women for Kansas, and with Brad's help, he's on the research committee, we can put you in contact with that as well. And I want to thank you ladies for your work and for your time here today. It was very informative and so important, so thank you so much. They have so many resources in the back available, ready to take with you.
Yes.
And next meeting, Women for Kansas, October 7th, here with Davis Hammett with Loud Light. So.
If I didn't know that, I'd worn my.
Turn it off.
I know.